Welcome to this week's edition of Interface. My name is Thembisa. Well, the Sexual Offences Act is being amended to make child sex legal. If this law is passed, children from 12 years to 16 will not be prosecuted for having sex, kissing or patting. Pata. Well, last October, the Constitutional Court ruled that child sex is not criminal. Parents are now concerned that sexual activity among children will lead to increased teenage pregnancy, HIV infection, and child abuse. What can we do to delay sexual activity among young children? That's one of the questions that we're asking tonight on Interface. And joining us to discuss this is Vincentia Dlamini-Ngobese, who is the spokesperson for Women and Men Against Child Abuse. And also joining us from our Parley studios is Steve Swart, who is an MP of the ACDP, the African Christian Democratic Party, and he's also a senior member of the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services. Well, also, let me just thank you up front for all of your comments coming through on Facebook, Interface on SABC2, and also on Twitter, Interface at Interface on SABC, that's the right one, and also at Thembisa. Well, the debate, as I can just tell you, Vincentia, has been raging on our social media pages, and as you can imagine, very clear lines of division between those who are for this and those who are against it. Let's first start by setting the scene here. What are the current consequences now if the children engage in sexual activity? Is it prison time? Is it correctional services stuff, or what happens?
Okay, what currently before the decriminalization is that children needed to be prosecuted for having sex with each other, and then that would be at the discretion of the senior prosecutor, state prosecutor, who will make a decision on what needs to be done on this particular case. Do I jail these two children? Do I send them for diversion program? Do I send them for community program? But it means that at the end of the day, the child would have a criminal record.
And this includes kissing. It's everything from kissing.
This includes sexual activity. Okay. And sexual activity includes kissing and all that, sexual acts, doing sexting, obviously sending your naked pictures to each other, those youth activities that, children engage in terms of being sexual beings.
So why did the Court see it fit to accept these amendments or to put forward these amendments?
Okay, because the way previously it was done, it was not a solution, and it was creating even more problems, because this comes as a punitive measure, and it says that actually there's a lot of reasons why children engage in sexual activities, and for us to say children need to go to jail, it doesn't solve the problem. So we needed to look at why are the children having sex, and why are we concentrating on children that are having sex? Because every behavior is learned. Children come to this world as a clean slate. So for them to be having sex, they should have seen it somewhere. Children are exposed to sexual activity. We live in a world where you get a pornographic DVD for 5 rands.
Does that mean you should give them a free-for-all? That, there's no consequence if you do have sex?
We're not talking about no consequence at all. We're talking about preventive measures. We're calling for everybody to come with systems to say, instead of you saying, you having sex, you 12-year-old and 13-year-old, you were found in the school toilets having sex, just go to prison, face the court. We are not for that. We are saying, come here, we look at the bottom of it. What really happened? Was this child groomed as a child? Because we have children that have been groomed for years. Since the age of 5, she's been groomed by somebody very close to them. And for them, that sexual behavior has been normalized. But are we saying for somebody who did not choose to be engaging in sexual activity as a child, was exposed to this, to face the, to be convicted of a criminal offense? Okay. That is not really fair for those children. So we have to look at the bigger picture here.
Steve Swart from the ACDP, why should children be jailed for kissing?
Good evening to your viewers. Good evening. I think first of all we need to place this in the correct perspective. When we passed this legislation, we agreed across all political parties that no child will ever go to jail. We built into the legislation that there will be diversion processes. Our aim was to protect the vulnerable young child from the elder child predators. And we know that there's a lot of abuse taking place in our schools. And so we need to see it in that context. Under what conditions can a young child consent to having sex, and that is the crux. When we look at kissing and hugging, clearly that was never intended. The law does not involve itself with trivialities. There'd never be a prosecution for that. So we respect the court's order, and we're going to be looking very carefully at this amendment from the ACDP side. But we want to say up front that it is fundamentally wrong from a moral perspective for children to have sex with one another, and I think your guest will agree with me on that. How we deal with that, surely it is important, and that was what we intended, that there would be a deterrent, and that would serve to discourage children from engaging in early and premature sex with the implications of HIV/AIDS, pregnancies, and that type of thing.
Let me just establish this. Are you or are you not opposed to these amendments?
Well, at this stage, we are opposed to the main amendments, but we are looking at some of the others. Obviously, the issue of the Sexual Offences Register for children, that is something that we need to look at. We are also looking at the issue of the prosecutor's discretion, that we welcome. So there are some of the amendments that are positive. We do believe the Act can be tidied up. Remember, this was a very comprehensive and broadly accepted Act to protect vulnerable children from adult predators and other children predators, like gangsters at schools, like 16-year-olds. So we need to see it in that context. But what my concern is now...
Help us understand this, Steve. Help us understand this. You're saying, in essence, you don't want children to be jailed for having sex. But at the same time, you are objecting to some amendments or some aspects of the amendments.
Because the process, the process is the Child Justice Act will kick in. Children will not be jailed. They will go on diversion processes together with NGOs that will then teach our children that it is risky and dangerous to be involved in sex, adolescent sex at a young age. And that was always the intention. And that we'll be watching from the Portfolio Committee to ensure that that is how it is implemented. Now, the court has said that is not sufficient. So we accept that, and that is why this amendment is before us. But I'm not in favor of this amendment.
Just before we go to break then, it seems like in essence you are agreeing, Vincentia.
I think he is correct to say that children need to go for diversion program when these happen. But we also saying that it's not fair for children to be found on those registers. He did mention something about the register, that we do not want children to be found in that register, that when it's diverted, when you send a child for diversion, you are giving hope to this child to say, you have engaged in an activity that is not acceptable, change your ways. And the reason for diversion, we are for diversion. But what is not acceptable is that children need to have that stigma for the rest of their lives.
All right, we're going to have to unpack this after the break. Steve, we're going to come back to you to unpack what these diversions are. But we have to take a short break. And remember, we are taking your thoughts on Facebook and also on Twitter. Stay with us.